right, we are back. So I guess we'll handle the most obvious thing first. How did I get so beat up? And I would love to tell you a story about how I had to intervene and fight a cougar off with just my bare hands to save a couple of children that were playing nearby, but that's not what happened. The real truth of how I got so beat up was I was making coffee. Yeah, hard to believe, but if anyone could get severely injured from making coffee, that's me. All right, I'm the king, apparently, now newly crowned. So anyway, I'll just tell you the story real quick because I've had to tell the story even when I went to the hospital. They're like, how did you do this? I'm like, I was making coffee. They're like, how? I'm like, all right. So I have pictures. So basically, here's how I make my coffee, right? I got this filter basket. I make it 1 cup at a time. I actually put a coffee filter in this thing to keep it a little cleaner. Okay, so when you have a proper size cup, you just put it on top of the cup, and you pour your boiling water in there, and it's wonderful coffee. And it's your coffee machine doesn't get dirty and start making your coffee taste crappy. It's clean every time because you can put that stainless steel thing in the dishwasher, right? I love it. I use that on my boat too, so you can take it on the run. So anyway, so there's this cup I like to use when I'm out of cups, but I like to use it because it's big, because I like coffee, right? And it's this Christmas cup, and here it is. And you can see the problem is that the cup is too big for the filter. It still works, and I've gotten away with it about 15 or 20 times, but as you can see, it's too big for this filter basket, and consequently, this is what could happen to it, right? So there's your little demonstration pictures. So what happened was I centered this thing in the middle to put my coffee filter and the coffee in it. With my right hand, I was holding this thing. My left hand, I poured in boiling water, like right to the top, right? Because, even though that's dangerous, I mean, it would be a lot more work to, pour just a little bit in each time, right? And I will be honest with you as well, because I'm honest, even when it doesn't work for me, it crossed my mind to find a cup I didn't want to use and make the coffee in there and just pour it into my big cup. It crossed my mind, but I'm like, I've gotten away with this so many times. What could go wrong? So anyway, I'm holding this thing. I fill it up, and I can see that it's canting a little bit, right? It's turning a little. I'm like, huh. So I get my left hand in there, and I go to straighten it. But because it's sitting right on the edge, the minute you're off that edge, there's just nothing holding it, right? So it turns over, and it spills water on this wrist, right? And I'm like, and I pull my hand away, and then the whole thing flips the other way, and all of it goes right over top of this palm, over the back of my hand. And I'm like, ugh, and I shake it off, and I'm like, that was boiling hot water right out of the kettle. Like literally 5 seconds after it boiled, and I poured it in, right? So I was like, ugh. So I'm like, I step over, and I stay calm. If there's anything I'm good at, it's staying calm no matter what. Like my heart rate doesn't even go up, right? Maybe when I jerk my hands away, but other than that, like I'm cool as a cucumber. I'm like, okay. I step over to the side, I turn the water on, and I'm like, hold my hands under there. Because I don't, like I have basic first aid, but I don't, like if a penetrating wound, no problem. Some kind of crushing, blunt trauma, no problem. Lacerations, I know what to do, but I couldn't remember anything about burns. I just don't know that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm like, I know I got to hold my hands under here for like 10 or 15 minutes. That I do know. Well, my hands are covered in boiling hot water, coffee now, and coffee grounds. So I'm like moving it around, right, to both stop the burning process and to get these coffee grounds off. So I guess this wrist, I gets, most of the stuff off, and this wrist, I'm holding my hands so they're both getting water, right? So anyway, I'm doing this, and I go to wipe the coffee grounds off my wrist and hand, and my skin comes off, right? And I'm like, uh-oh. And I'm like, I don't know how to treat that. But anyway, I kept going. I'm like, okay, what's my next move? So it's funny because this is how my mind works. I'm looking at all this coffee. Here's a picture of what the kitchen looked like, right? After it happened, okay? So of course my priority is I better get a picture of this from my wife. And so I'm like, that's going to stain my counter. And that's, I don't have like 15 grand to buy another one, right? So I'm like, okay. So once I did my 10 or 15 minutes of cold water, I was like, okay. I go over and I get the coffee off there. And then as my hands were, arms were drying off, here comes the pain, right? Because burns are painful. And I'm like, okay. So I put my arms under, and that stops the pain, right? It takes it right down to from a 9 to a 9 out of 10 to a 3. And I'm like, okay, and clean up a little bit. And now I'm looking at this hand, and the whole thing had turned white because I'd lost, all the skin is dead, right? The epidermis layer of my skin is all dead. And there's a big, swath where the skin came off, and it's all starting to turn white. It's lifting off the next layer, right? And I'm like, I don't think I can treat this by myself. I think I may have to go to the hospital, right? So I'm like, okay. So I left the rest of the mess. At least I got off the counter so it wouldn't stain the counter, and then kept going. And I called an ambulance because I'm like, I don't know if I should be driving because more skin might come off. And if the pain starts hitting me, it might be a problem. If somebody was shooting at me, I would have driven, but I don't have to, right? So I call an ambulance. So I'm like, okay, here's the thing. I was making coffee, burnt my hands off. I just want to make sure that, I treat this right because I don't want to get an infection, because that's your biggest danger with burns, right? Is that you either you go into shock, or you get an infection. So anyway, I was like, okay, ambulance comes. I had texted my wife, like, here's what happened, and here's a picture of my hand. And so she's like, I'm coming right now. But anyway, I already had the ambulance coming. So they kind of got me to the point where I wasn't going to get infected or whatever, dressed it, right? Cleaned it, dressed it a little bit. And off we go to the hospital. So when I get to the hospital, they're like, yeah, all this dead skin, that's got to come off. Because if you leave that on there, you're going to have more scarring than you're already going to have. I'm like, okay. So they had to pull the skin up and cut it off with scissors. And it was quite a little adventure. But anyway, oddly enough, I will tell you this, the pain wasn't that bad. Like the first day it hurt a fair bit. Like, it's not comfortable, but I'm not taking any painkillers. I took an extra strength Tylenol twice that first day and 1 Tylenol 3. And that was it. So surprised, it wasn't that as bad as I thought it would be. But yeah, you're going to get used to me with this huge scar here now as my skin starts to heal back. But anyway, here's the most important part of the story. I have enough time to heal before my bear hunt. It's not going to wreck the bear hunt. All right. Anyway, that's what happened to me. So be careful when you're making your coffee out there, folks.
Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.